Rivian did not hire that from the money. Okay? My name is Tommy Daniels. I'm the regional commissioner for the Southeast. Patrick Sullivan called me from the South. I'm also known as the mayor of Rivian. For all my friends, it's TT. Our next speaker is known as the honey badger of human potential. Bold, direct, impossible to ignore. In more than 15 years, Kevin Fink has trained thousands of leaders across the automotive world, from salespeople to CEOs, helping them transform not only their businesses, but more importantly, their lives. He's a certified financial planner, a leadership trainer with high five leadership, and the founder of Life Wizards Coaching, where he works with entrepreneurs and executives to rewrite their story and hold them back. Today, Kevin is here to show what collision repair can teach us about our mindset, resilience, and leadership. Please show some love and help me welcome to the stage, Kevin Fink.
Silence and stories. Two very powerful communication tools when used properly, and dangerous when not. For the last 60 seconds, each and every one of you made up a story about me in your mind. For some of you, the story was, he's probably just gathering his thoughts. Others of you thought, I wonder if he's nervous. Some of you might have even thought, oh my God, I hope we didn't pay this guy very much because this sucks. And others of you might have wondered whether or not I could remember what I was supposed to say. But the truth is, none of you knew. So your brain filled in the blanks. You were mind reading. And that's what we do all the time in every situation, even when we don't have the facts. Because silence is uncomfortable. So we fill in the blanks. Uncomfortable, isn't it? So why would I start with stories? Because when we make up stories, sometimes they benefit us and sometimes they don't. And if the story that you're telling yourself is negative or doesn't have the facts, excuse me, then quite often it's keeping you from your potential. So let's do a little experiment. By a show of hands, during that first 60 seconds of silence, how many of you were telling yourself a positive story about what I was doing? By a show of hands? All right, Jen and my wife, perfect. And my lady over here, that's great. By a show of hands, how many of you were telling yourselves a negative story? It's okay to be honest. Most of you, thank you. And by a show of hands, how many of you didn't know what to think, but it was uncomfortable? The rest of you, thank you. See, that's the power of story. It can build us up, it can hold us neutral, or or it can tear us down before we ever have the facts. So here's the thing about stories. And I'm not talking about the fairy tales or the books you read when you were a kid. I'm talking about the one that goes on in your brain all the time, the narrative that you're living within. Because most of you have stories that sound like this. I have to do everything myself. If I ask for help, I'm weak. I'm not a leader. I just run a business. And the thing about stories is that they affect us, and they are affecting your outcomes, your results, and your relationships, whether you realize it or not. So where do stories come from? By the time we're 7 years old, 45% of our belief system is firmly in place. 7 years old. And by the time we get to 18, over 99% of what we believe to be true for the rest of our lives is firmly in place. So put that into context. You're not out of high school. You're not old enough to legally buy your own beer. You can barely vote, and 99% of what you're going to believe for the rest of your life is firmly locked into place. Now, certainly, some of the stories that you have come from your experiences in life. But by the time you're 18 years old, where did those stories come from? They came from the people that raised you, your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, your teachers, your clergy people. And most people never stop to even consider, are these stories true for me or not? Are these my stories? Are they benefiting me? Because you see, in life, we all take hits. What do I mean by that? Sometimes it's a minor fender bender. Other times it's a full head-on collision. And in life, those crashes, they show up as failures, betrayals, shame, guilt, loss. And if you don't acknowledge those things, if you just pretend they're not there, or you hope that they'll go away, well, here's the news. It doesn't get better. In fact, it gets worse. And just like no Rivian vehicle should ever leave your shop without having gone through the full repair experience, it is impossible for us to go through our lives full speed without doing the work ourselves. And it was during my preparation for this speech that I actually realized that the same 5 basic steps that you go through in your repair process in your shop are the same 5 steps that we can go through in order to repair our lives. So let's go through each one by one. First step in the shop, someone brings in a vehicle. What do? You do a walk around, you take pictures, you make notes, you go through OE procedures, you write up an estimate. You slow down long enough to make sure that you see everything as it is, not how you want it to be. And doing the first step correctly makes everything after that easier. In life, awareness is our estimate. Becoming aware of what's going on. Taking the time to slow down and stop bulldozing through life to actually identify what is the damage, what are the beliefs, and what are the stories underneath the hood that are running the show. Silence, in this case, can be helpful because when you get silent and you actually focus on what's not working, you can actually identify those areas that you want to get better. It can also be harmful because if you're pretending that there's no damage or you're avoiding it, the silence can hurt. So I want you to think for just a second, each and every one of you, I want you to think about some area in your life right now that's not driving straight. Maybe it's your relationship with money. Maybe it's in your relationship with your significant other. Maybe it's something at work. And I just want you to identify that area, okay? And I want you to think about what is the story that you're telling yourself about what's going on in that area of life. And then come up with one fact that you can say, and here's a fact that proves that that story is true, okay? So all of you have that. That is your human spec sheet. That's your opportunity to look at what's my awareness. Creating the awareness is step one. So my awareness happened on one of the darkest nights of my life. It was September 18th, 2019. I was in Brookfield, Illinois, which is a suburb just west of Chicago. I remember the sky. I remember the weather. It was that warm, humid, sticky heat just before fall sets in. And for those of you from the South, fall is a season that happens between summer and winter up in the Great White North. In our house, it was chaos. Not out loud, but in the story I had going in my head. Now, my wife, Michelle, she was in the room with me, but I wasn't really with her. See, it felt like my rib cage wanted to explode. My heart was beating fast, too loud, like it wanted to come out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. And the thing that was pissing me off was that nothing had happened that day. There was no financial catastrophe, no emergency phone calls, nothing. I just knew that something was broken, and I didn't know how to fix it. I was in the middle of a full-blown panic attack, but I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was that I needed to go. I don't know where I needed to go. I just knew I needed to go. And I told Michelle that. I got up, I went out, I got on my bicycle, and I just started to ride. Tears were pouring down my cheeks. And I rode for about an hour until I found myself in our little downtown. It was probably, 10 o'clock at night, so most of the stores were closed, intersections were empty. Have you ever been someplace that you've been there before, and this time you go and you see it, and it kind of looks like a movie set or a TV set? That's kind of how it was for me that night. It felt like I had stepped out of my body and was observing my own breakdown. And then I saw the train tracks, and I heard the horn. The train was 2 stops away. So the stories that were going through my mind were so loud. The stories were, how could you be so stupid? You're a failure and a fraud. Your dad was right. You can't handle money. See, what was causing me the breakdown was that I had blown through not 1, but 2 life-changing inheritances. Now, you may go, oh, okay, whatever, you spent that money. But here's the thing. This wasn't when I was a kid and didn't know any better. I was a grown-ass man. I was a certified financial planner. I helped Wow, I got 11. I helped thousands of people to plan their retirements and how to handle their money. I stood on stages like this and I trained other advisors on how to help people handle money. But behind the curtain, I was drowning. And the shame and the guilt were oppressive. Because you see, shame and guilt like that, they don't just sit back in the shadows. Oh no, when you're alone, they're screaming in your ear. It interrupts dinner. It disrupts sex. It takes away your self-worth. I could hear the train as it got closer. The horn was getting closer. The crossing arms began to come down. The lights began to flash. The bells began to ring. Ding, 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 ding. Train was one stop away. I got off my bike and I took a step closer to the tracks. And in that moment, the question that was going through my mind was not, what are they going to think about me? The question was, will the life insurance proceeds make up for all the mistakes that I've made? Because you see, it wasn't about dying. It was about wanting to escape the pain and the shame and the guilt, the unresolved emotional trauma that I had buried and that I've been carrying for years. I could feel the air pressure change as the train came barreling through the intersection at 70 miles an hour. The engineer laid on the horn. I could feel my clothes blowing in the breeze as the train passed within inches of my face. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. But I also didn't take a step forward, clearly. Once the train had passed, I stood there sobbing. Eventually, I calmed down enough. I was able to take out my phone and text Michelle, I'm okay. I'm coming home. Got on my bike and I rode back home. And when I walked in the living room, she didn't yell. She didn't scream. In fact, she didn't say a word. She came up, wrapped me up in the biggest hug, the most loving, caring hug, and said, I love you, and we will get through this together. You see, becoming aware, that's the estimate. Taking the time. See, my silence that night almost killed me. Because silence, when combined with false stories, can be deadly. But it was that night that my healing began, because I finally was willing to consider that I didn't have it figured out and that something needed to change. Now, that was my awareness. But awareness alone doesn't heal. You got to go through the rest of the steps. So step 2 in the shop, once you get the estimate done and they decide to get the fix, is the tear down. So you start pulling panels. You start drilling out welds. You start looking for the hidden bends in the frame. And quite often, you'll pull a part that looks fine on the outside, but as soon as you get it off, you can see that there's hidden damage underneath. Same thing is true in life, because the teardown process is where we have to get rid of this unresolved emotional trauma and baggage. Until you let go of the charge, the trauma, your future is very predictable. So you have to start stripping away the layers and see what's actually underneath, what's going on, what are the stories. Silence here, again, can be beneficial. Because if you get silent and you start looking and thinking back about what are my stories? Where did they come from? Why am I doing these things? Why are these patterns of behavior continuing even though I know better? Silence can be really powerful there. But again, it can be dangerous because if you're using it to hide, if you're not telling yourself the truth, it can literally be deadly. So my awareness, or my teardown, came from a story that had been welded to my frame since I was a kid. When I was between 10 and 11 years old, so 1979, 1980 time frame, my mom took me shopping for school clothes. And I told her that there were only two things that I wanted that year. I wanted a pair of Nikes, because Nikes had come out like 2 or 3 years before, so everybody wanted Nikes. And I wanted an Izod polo shirt. So Izod's the one with the little alligator on it. That's it. I said, I don't care. Anything else, whatever. But I want those two things. And what my mom said to me that day was, well, here's the deal. We don't buy name brand things. And frankly, I knew we could afford it. I grew up in an upper middle class family. My parents were self-employed. We had nice vacations. I knew we could afford an Izod shirt and a pair of Nikes, okay? But again, what she said to me was, we don't buy name brand things because your dad has a lot of health issues. And at some point in the future, since we don't have health insurance, at some point in the future, we're going to have to pay a lot of money for his health care. So we don't pay extra for name brand things. We save. So Kmart clothes and Payless shoes are good enough. I'm 56 years old now. I was 10 or 11. I carried that story with me for 40 years. It was affecting me because those were her words. But my little 10-year-old brain, what it heard was, you're not as good as those other kids, and you're not worthy of nice things. So I literally carried those two stories without knowing it. It was buried in my subconscious. I never went and walked around going, well, I'm just not as good as other kids, and I'm not worth. No. If you had asked me, do you think you're as good as other kids? Hell yes, I do. Do you think you're worthy of money? Of course. But the programming said something different. And it continued to affect me for almost 50 years. It affected me in high school. It affected my relationships. It affected my finances. It caused me to overspend to prove that I was worthy. It caused me to seek approval rather than value. And it brought me seconds, ultimately, from stepping in front of a speeding freight train. So understanding and doing that teardown and understanding where that's coming from, what are the stories? Where are those hidden cracks? Because if you had looked at me from the outside, I was like that piece that looks just fine. But as soon as you take off the panel, you start to see what's hidden beneath. And just like, well, here's the thing. If you continue to tell yourself a story long enough, even if it's based on false information, it becomes your truth, even if it's bullshit. And just like you take off those pieces and you see the deeper damage that wasn't there, for me, what that exposed was a rift that I had with my dad. So the third step in the repair process is fixing the frame. Now, when we fix the frame in the shop, you don't just eyeball it. No, you use lasers, you use calibration equipment, you use spec sheets, right? You use all these things because precision matters. Millimeters matter. Because if the frame is off by even a small fraction, every additional mile gets it further and further out of whack. And in life, our framework is based upon living our values. Now, my relationship with my dad. When I was 28 years old, I had just gotten into the insurance and financial services business. And I approached my dad and I said, "Hey, Dad, would you let me help you manage your portfolio?" And here's what he said: "You're not capable of managing my money." Now, none of these other things had happened yet, but his first response was, "You're not capable of managing my money." Now, what I knew is he was working with a stockbroker who was stealing from him and who was doing illegal things, but I wasn't good enough. This was another example of, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. And so I stopped talking to him for 2 years. I was 28 years old. Because of that rift, he made the choice to never meet his only blood grandson, my oldest son, Jason. He made that choice. And then 2 years after Jason was born, he died suddenly of a heart attack. He was 65 years old, and we had not reconciled. And because we hadn't reconciled, he also chose to disinherit me and my sons, my family, which was another, fuck you. Another, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. So I carried that with me. I carried that anger towards my dad. And I blamed him for the things that were going on in my life. I blamed him for dying. I blamed him for never having the courage to have the conversation with me. And then about 10 years after he passed, I was kind of in the beginning phases of my personal growth journey. And in the class that I was in at that time, one of the assignments was to go home and write a letter of forgiveness to the person in your life who you've been holding the grudge on the longest. Well, it was pretty easy for me to decide who that was. Remember, he had been dead for 10 years. So I went home and I wrote the letter. And the next day I came to class, and it was a room with about as many people as are in here. So there were several hundred people in the room. And I stood up in front of that group of strangers and I read my letter. And I told him all the things that I couldn't tell him when he was alive. And that day, in that letter, I forgave him. I forgave him for all the pains, all the things that he did, all the things that he didn't do. I just forgave him. And that one conversation, that was one of the most powerful conversations I ever had with my dad, and he had been dead for 10 years. But it was that day that I learned that forgiveness is a superpower. Because when you truly forgive, when you love yourself enough to let go of all of the shit that you've been holding on to, the stories about all the things that happened, when you love yourself enough to truly let that go, it changes everything. Forgiveness is a superpower. And just so I make sure you understand this, forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. It's not for them. It's for you. It's for you to move forward in your life powerfully, happy. See, it goes back to the values. I said step 3 was about your values. What I learned was that I was not living my values as it related to my dad. 2 of my highest values are love, which you may notice I use a lot during this talk. My 2 highest values or 2 of my highest values are love and personal responsibility. Carrying that anger against him for 10 years and the 2 years I didn't speak to him, that wasn't loving him. That wasn't loving his memory. And blaming him and acting like a victim for all the things that were going on in my life, that wasn't personal responsibility. But when I started to own those values and truly live by my values and forgave, I let go of the shit. I let go of that unresolved emotional baggage. Now I could begin to start setting outcomes. I could begin to start planning who I wanted to be for the rest of my life based on my values, what was important to me. See, if your values say family first, but your calendar says work first, your frame's out of alignment. And if your values say integrity, but your actions say cut corners because it's the last day of the month, your frame's out of alignment. So where are you out of alignment with your values? Do you even know what your values are? Most people, again, don't take time to go through and determine, what are my values? What's guiding me in life? How do I know when I come to a crossroads, how do I know which way to go? The answer is very simple, your values. But just because you have values doesn't mean it's easy to always live within them. Sometimes we don't. So the 4th step for me, which was the rebuild process, was to recognize an area where I had been out of integrity with one of my values. I had an affair while I was married to my second wife, and it destroyed our marriage. The value that I was not keeping was family. Family is one of my highest values, and having an affair is not in keeping with the value of family, certainly. And for quite a while, I told myself the story that I ruined everything. So let's go back to the shop. In the shop, the 4th step is the rebuild process, right? So you sand and you paint and you do all the things, buff, right? You do all the things, you put it back together. And when you do, before you ever do the first step, though, you visualize what that rebuilt car or truck is going to look like. You visualize handing the keys to your happy customer. In life, the 4th step, the rebuild process, is what we call future pacing. Future pacing is when you see yourself in the future, living your values, accomplishing your outcomes, the things that you say you want to do, literally putting yourself out into the future and seeing yourself achieving it before you've ever taken action. That's called future pacing. And when you do that, you create the energy that actually will pull you to that outcome. Okay, I just got a little woo-woo, but believe me, it works. If any of you have ever heard of the law of attraction or The Secret, that's what it's about. It's about creating the energy as if it's already happened. And what that does is neurologically in your brain, Through neuroplasticity, which is the rewiring of the brain, it actually creates the neural pathways to give you the behaviors that you will actually take to get to that outcome. It's fascinating stuff. So for me, the rebuild, as a result of the affair, was to recognize this is not who I am as a human being. This is not who I want my boys to think of me as. So what I started to do was visualizing myself living a life of integrity, living a life of family, showing them in my mind what it would look like to be a good husband and a good father. Showing them that vulnerability in men is not a weakness. In fact, it's a strength. So I visualized all these things. Does it forgive the fact that I had an affair? No. But again, what it does is it gets me back in alignment with what my values are and what it is that I want, how I want to look, what I want that to be like, so that I then can go into step number 5. Step number 5, of course, is the final check. So during the final check, you make sure that everything's calibrated, make sure that everything, that it drives at highway speeds, that it's safe, all those things. Well, in life, the final check is actually doing the work, taking the steps, doing the actions. Because it's one thing to visualize what you want your life to look like in the future, but then you don't just get to sit on the couch and Netflix and binge. You got to do something. So taking action is where you know that the alignment is in fact correct. So what was my final check? Again, around junior high time in my life, I was bullied. I was bullied for my last name. I was bullied for being overweight. I was bullied for my religion. I was probably bullied because I was wearing the hippo on my shirt instead of the alligator. I don't remember. And in order for me to feel good about myself, I became a bully. I picked on people that were weaker than I was because I felt like if I'm the one doing this, they can't be doing it to me. I already told you one of my highest values is love. That's certainly not being loving. But a couple years ago, I got a text message or a Facebook message from someone that I had bullied around that time. And frankly, I will tell you this. I did and said shit to people. I never physically hurt anybody, but my mental and emotional abuse on them was horrific. I said some horrific shit. She reached out to me and she said, "I'm sure you don't remember me." I didn't. She said, "But I've thought about you every day for the last 40 years. You used to make fun of me every day in homeroom. So much so that I didn't want to come to school. And frankly, thought about killing myself." My words did that. I was horrified. I told her, that's not who I am. I apologized. I asked for her forgiveness. And whatever she needed in communicating with me that way, what I'll tell you is that we changed 2 stories that day. She changed her story from here's somebody who doesn't give a shit about me to somebody who truly is willing to change. And I changed my story from someone who is a bully, who makes other people feel small, to somebody who uplifts, loves, and helps them with kindness, because kindness is also one of my top values. Today, she reaches out to me all the time. It's kind of interesting. We've never met again in person, but she's wanted to get together. She actually wanted to come to a high five class based on the difference between who I was then and who I am now. So those are our 5 steps. Not just theory, but lived. Awareness at the railroad tracks, tear down through money shame, framework through forgiveness, rebuild through overcoming a failure, and final checking to make sure, taking the actions, doing the things in kindness and love, making sure that the frame is in alignment. Just like you apply them every day to the vehicles that go through your shops, you can apply it in your life as well. Sounds simple, but it's not always easy. So you remember where we started, 60 seconds of silence. I want to ask you again, where in your life are you being silent? Where in your life are you holding back from looking at what's really going on and hiding behind things like, I'm fine, I'm good, everything's great? Maybe it's a conversation that you're not having with someone you love. Maybe it's something that's going on at the shop that you haven't dealt with. And I simply want you to take a moment, just take a few seconds and either take out your phone or write it down on a piece of paper. Just write down the one area of life where silence is hurting me is. Just write it down. Nobody's going to collect it. Nobody's going to look at it. It's not for anybody but you. And the benefit of doing that is once you bring it out of the darkness, you can actually do something with it. So, a friend of mine, former CEO and chairman of the board at Caliber, Steve Grimshaw, used to say, you're not in the collision repair business. You're in the people business. You just happen to fix cars. But here's the thing. You don't just repair vehicles. You help rebuild trust. You help people regain some confidence. You give them back some peace of mind. Because when you meet your customers, it is at one of the lowest points of their lives. They've either had a crash, an accident, or a loss of control. And you're not just giving them back a repaired vehicle, you're giving them back the feeling that they are safe again. That's who you are. You're a leader. You're the role model. You're the anchor in your family and your teams and your communities. And here's the thing. When you're walking around dragging your damage behind you, refusing to deal with it, everybody in your life that cares about you is affected. But when you make the choice to recalibrate your mind, to rewrite your story, self-confidence returns. Home life becomes happier, more loving, more fun. Your teams get stronger. Everybody wins. And you're worthy of that. And I want you to imagine right now that you didn't have to wait until January 1st of next year to start fresh. What if you made the choice right now that the next 4 months were going to be the most focused, aligned, powerful, of your entire career, if you made the choice to stop dragging behind from the past and bringing it into the present and just choose to lead from right now moving forward, what would that create in your life? Because it's available to you. You don't need new strategies. You just need to tune up your mind and write a better story. Now, I don't have any magic wrenches, but I do have some very powerful tools. Tools that can help you recalibrate your mindset, that can help you actually get laser focused on your vision and to create a business that supports your life rather than drains you from it. So if any of the things that I have talked about up here today, and if you guys would throw up that next slide, if any of the things that I have shared up here today have resonated with you, I would encourage you to not leave this room and just let that go away. Come find me at the next break. If you want to stay connected, the QR code on the left will take you to my webpage, lifewizardcoach.com. There's a little form there, name, email address, phone number, and a little box to put in some comments. If you just put Rivian and whatever else you want to say, I'll stay connected with you. I'll send you a newsletter periodically, and you can stay connected to this. And if you want to take the time to have a conversation, the QR code on the right is a link to my calendar. I've set aside time for the next 2 weeks for you. Anybody that wants to have a conversation to understand how can you recalibrate your mind, reach out. No commitment, no cost. Let's just have a conversation. Because you are absolutely worthy of living the life you want, aligned with your outcomes, aligned with your values. You repair cars and trucks and Rivians every day. It's time for you to do the same for yourself. Thank you.